and it makes you think you're starving when you're not. Carbohydrates in general do this. They raise your insulin, which blocks leptin, which comes from your fat cells to tell your brain how much energy you have in storage. And so it's like a running gas cage. And, when you block that, it's like breaking your gas tank. So it just looks like you're running on empty the whole time. And so you're going like, oh, I got to get gas. I got to get gas. I got to get gas. So you're just constantly, filling up and you're spilling gas all over the place, but you don't realize it because you're like, oh, I'm on empty. I'm on empty. So your brain is telling you you're starving to death. You need to eat. You need to eat because your blood sugar is dropping too. Because when insulin's up, it forces energy into cells. It doesn't allow it to come out of cells. And so now you can't make blood sugar. You can't make glycogen. You're not making ketones. And so the only energy you have are these exogenous carbohydrates that you've eaten and the glycogen that you've now stored because of them. And then when you start running out of that, your blood sugar starts dropping off and you start getting all upset and tired and think, oh gosh, I really need to eat something. So we do this 3-4 times a day. Why is that? You're eating thousands of calories. You're eating way too much. You're eating way more than you actually need. And yet you're still hungry and you still feel awful. And so, that means that something's broken. Your senses, that are ingrained and finely tuned over millions and millions of years of evolution. They don't just break like that, and why do things taste bad if they're good for us? That doesn't make sense either. Things can taste good, maybe sugar, that's an outlier, but we recognize that's something safe that we can eat short term so that we can get what we want, but it's going to damage us long term. But if something tastes bad, it is bad. That's just a rule. And so, why can we not trust our taste? Why can we not trust our hunger and satiety signals? That doesn't make sense. But when you're eating naturally, you can listen to all these things. And so that's when you're more on the right track. So, it's a very harmful substance, sugar and carbohydrates in general. And, they make you hungry. They make you overeat. They're addictive. And so people start off adding in a little bit of honey, like, oh, I was told I could eat this. Great. And they have some honey, they have some sugar, and it tastes good and they like it. It makes them feel good. Of course it does. It's a drug. People like drugs. That's why they do drugs. But they're drugs. And so it's going to catch up with you eventually. And so, the people say like, oh, a little bit of honey and fruit. Okay. But it starts off as little, but this is a drug. I'm sure your cocaine habit started off as a little bit of cocaine every now and then as well. The problem is that a little bit can turn into a lot very easily with addictive substances. And I've worked with many patients who've listened to that advice and basically found it as an excuse to refeed their sugar addiction. And so they started eating carbohydrates again. They started eating fruit again. They started eating honey again. And it started off as a little and a little more and a little more and a little more. And they're like, oh, this is good for me. I can do this. And then within, 5-6 months, they're back eating, pizza and donuts and all sorts of garbage. And they put on all this weight and they're sick again. And then, some of them have seen, me talk about this and they've approached me and just said, wow, this was the exact cycle that I took. And now, having a look at this, I'm like, yeah, I've just got to get rid of everything. I've got to get rid of the sugar as well. And so I think that it's important to realize that. And I think it's important to understand that you really don't need carbohydrates. You flat out don't. You certainly don't need fructose. There are no biochemical processes in the body that require exogenous fructose and can't be accomplished by something else. None. So you don't need this stuff. You certainly don't need it. And I would argue that you really don't want it either.
Yeah, I'm really glad you brought that up. That was something specifically I was going to ask you about. There are popular carnivores like the ones that you mentioned, Dr. Saladino, Carnivore Aurelius. They were pushing a lot of organ supplements for a long time. And I don't know if they still are. They're not people that I follow anymore. I do have a high respect for them. And they were, definitely people that helped me with my understanding of the carnivore diet for a while. They were pushing a lot of organ supplements. And we had a listener question that was related to this. I've never made this connection, but eating too many organs, and then because you're eating too many organs, needing supplement and carbohydrates to supplement your diet. And now we see these people eating honey, eating fruit, eating fructose, like you said, eating juice, which I get a lot of questions about this, and people get really confused about it. And so how would you address that? I know it's something you just kind of answered, but this is like really specifically something that's on a lot of people's minds.
Yeah. Well, I think the thing is true with juice. I mean, where was that in our evolutionary past? You know, if you're going to go by, like, where we came from and how we evolved, we certainly didn't evolve with juice. I can tell you that. And that's something
Was there a juicer on the walls in France where they
yeah,
did
yeah,
like
yeah,
the
exactly.
first
Yeah,
paintings, like a little
yeah.
juicing machine?
Just there with a, a stick blender,
Exactly.
a pineapple. Um, no, and the fruits that we have now for juicing, these things are man-made. The original mango is a very tough, fibrous, not very sweet plant with a massive seed and barely any fruit. It's not the same thing. We've been, selectively breeding these things in a concentrated manner in order to make them as sweet as possible. That's not what we found in nature. So it's very, very different. Drinking juice certainly didn't happen. It just didn't. But that's something that I was very surprised by with Carnivore Realist, because he started saying, "Oh, no, actually, I was wrong. You actually need fructose. You actually need sugar, or else you'll get thyroid dysfunction," was what he was talking about at the time. And I've read one of his posts on it, and he cites different studies, but the problem is that you can get a study that says anything that you want. You need to be able to analyze these things and look at it as like, wait, this is talking about some very small mechanistic process. What does that translate to on the bigger picture? The bigger picture is we actually are carnivores. That's actually the kind of animal we are, and we actually existed exclusively on meat for millions of years. Okay, so if we needed fruit in order to survive and thrive, we would not be here, because we wouldn't have made it through the ice ages. The Eskimos right now would all be dying. They'd be dead. You can't go very long with extreme hypothyroidism. You don't make it. And let's say that it's sort of borderline and low level hypothyroidism, just to make you miserable, but it doesn't kill you, which it can kill you. Your kids are going to be screwed, because hypothyroidism in a woman when she's pregnant will make that fetus develop completely abnormally. There's actually a condition called cretinism. That's all the best insults used to be medical terminology. So call someone a cretin. That's a real thing. It's congenital hypothyroidism, and they get very specific facial deformities. They're short stature, so they're very small, and they're very severely intellectually delayed and impaired. And so this is a very serious issue. This is not a joke. And so if you had an entire race of people, an entire civilization that was exclusively eating meat and all getting hypothyroidism, all their kids would be getting cretinism. That lasts exactly one generation and you're dead. That's not going to work, So that doesn't even pass the smell test, and certainly juice doesn't. But I like Carnivore Realist, and I like Saladino. I would point my patients to their resources regularly before I had my own things to show them. I still think they have great resources. I mean, I disagree with them on this one, but that's one of the few things I disagree with them on. So I still think they're great resources. I just think this one is I certainly differ with. You brought up the organs, and that's something that I've conjectured, and I'm not their doctor. I don't know their medical history or anything like that. But it's just something that I've thought about from a first principle sort of basis. When you're eating organs, they're saying you should eat, and they do have supplement lines, and I think Carnivore Realist has like a dried liver snacks or something like that, and they really say like liver is really important, organs are really important, and I agree, they're very nutrient dense. Well, what was that word? It's dense. They're nutrient dense. They have a lot packed in a little. Do you need that much? That's the question. If you eat a bite of a polar bear liver, you will die from vitamin A poisoning. That's a well-known fact. Okay. Well, liver has a lot of vitamin A. This is a fat-soluble vitamin, and so it stores in your body. You don't just pee out the excess like you do vitamin C or vitamin B. So this will build up and it will store up, and you can start having problems, and you can have problems that go on for years, because this is fat soluble. It doesn't really go away that easily. It's actually kind of hard to clear. And so vitamin A can build up if you're eating things out of proportion. Now, if you look even Dr. Saladino, he shows that all these different tribes like the Hadza, they'll make a kill and they'll get this liver, and it's like they're like treating it reverently, and they pass it around. Everyone takes a small bite. But what are they doing? They're taking a small bite. And how often are they hunting? They hunt an animal, they take that down, depending on the size of the animal, depending on the size of the tribe. Maybe they're eating one animal for every few days for everyone, and they're getting one liver. And so they're getting like a bite every few days, maybe even every one day. It's one bite. The rest of their meals are largely skeletal muscle meat. You have to think to yourself, how many hundreds of pounds of skeletal muscle meat and fat are there in a cow compared to every 1 pound of liver? It's literally hundreds to one. Okay. So, if you're nutrient deprived and you're on a standard American diet and you're not really getting very good nutrient supply, liver's your best friend. But if you're on a carnivore diet, skeletal muscle meat and fat have everything that you need in the proportion that you need it, by definition, because that's what we evolved on. And you look at the Eskimos, you look at the Inuits, you look at Lewis and Clark. They did not eat the organs. They ate the meat. They ate the fattiest of the meat. Lewis and Clark, obviously the very famous expedition across America. You read their journals. They're super interesting. I was just talking to someone about this today. They talk about how, when they would hunt, they would eat the fattiest parts of the animals. And they found that the people that didn't eat the fattiest parts died. If they weren't getting enough fat, they died. They fed the lean bits and the organs to their dogs. They ate the fat. The dogs ate the lean stuff and the organs. They can survive on different things than we can. We need the fat. We need the skeletal fat and even the abdominal fat. But, we get all the vitamins and things like that we need from the muscle and fat. So if you're eating organs, that's fine if you enjoy them, but I'd go by taste as well. If liver tastes good, go for it. Your brain's probably telling you something. Hey, you're a bit deprived. Get it. Eventually it will not taste as good, probably. Raw organs taste very different though. Like raw liver, for some reason, tastes so much better than cooked liver. It's just a different thing altogether. But this has a lot of vitamin A. And so if you're eating, half a pound of liver a day, that's completely out of proportion with the amount of meat that you're eating. You're eating 2 pounds of meat and you're eating half a pound of liver. That's 4 to 1 as opposed to 200 to 1, or 400 to 1. So you're eating this stuff out of proportion. And if you're doing this regularly, ongoing, you are going to build up these fat soluble vitamins that are going to reach a level of toxicity called hypervitaminosis. Hypervitaminosis A is well known and well described to suppress your TSH, your thyroid stimulating hormone, which will then reduce the amount of thyroid hormone produced by your thyroid. This will give you low thyroid. And so, Dr. Saladino and Carnivore Aurelius, all of a sudden they're like, oh, I'm just eating meat and liver. And obviously liver is just the best thing ever. So that can't be it. And my thyroid's tanking and I feel like shit. Okay. Here's this little study that sort of says that if you have that you need sort of carbohydrates to do this, and forgetting the fact that our bodies make carbohydrates. We have blood sugar, we have glycogen. That didn't go anywhere. And you do get little spikes as well. So you kick yourself out of ketosis, when you eat, high protein or a big meal with a lot of protein in it, it will kick you out of ketosis for a little bit and then pop you back in because you make a corresponding amount of glucagon to actually, take you out to get your blood sugar back down to normal. But you do have this just transient spikes. Okay. And you drink some milk, does the same thing. So they're looking at this and saying, this must be, I need to eat exogenous carbohydrates. But as we know, we have hard evidence that we don't need any carbohydrates our entire lives, or else we wouldn't be here and the Inuits wouldn't be here. And also this is something that's well described, again, by the National Institute of Medicine and the National Association of Science. It's very clear. They're like, yeah, no, you don't need any carbohydrates. And, that's appealing to authority. Like, obviously, just because they're in charge doesn't mean that they're right, but, they do support their statement in this one. So when you're eating carbohydrates, it actually increases the amount of vitamins that you need. This is why people, look at carnivore diet and they say, well, this doesn't have enough vitamins and minerals. You can't survive. This doesn't have enough. Well, actually, when you're only eating meat and you're not eating carbohydrates, you're not eating, fruits and vegetables, you actually need less of these vitamins, a lot less, instead of 10, instead of needing milligrams of vitamin C, you need nanograms of vitamin C. Okay. Big difference, orders of magnitude, several orders of magnitude difference. Okay. So what happens? You have hypervitaminosis. Again, this is complete conjecture, but it's possible that someone who has hypervitaminosis can then eat carbohydrates, and all of a sudden their requirement for those vitamins actually increases as well. And they have too many vitamins, and now their need is here, so they have a toxic level. But now they eat carbohydrates, and now that brings them up, their demand up as well. So now they're sort of, it evens them out a bit. That could be what's happening. I don't know, but I do know that meat did not cause that, and not eating carbohydrates did not cause that. That's a fact, and you only need to look at the Inuits and the fact that ice ages happened to know that. Also, I've been doing strict carnivore for quite a lot longer than they have. People like Dr. Baker have as well, or maybe similar amount of time. And but then there's all sorts of people, like Kelly Hogan. She's been 10, 11 years just meat and just water. Charles Washington, even longer than that. There's people that have been doing this for decades in the West. And then of course all the human populations living naturally that just don't eat anything except meat. That's it. So we know that's not it. And if they're doing something similar to what I'm doing, but they're getting different results, it means they are doing something different that is significant. And I think that the main difference between them and I and Kelly Hogan and the Inuits is that they're eating organs. They're eating a lot of organs and even taking supplements for organs. I'm not there, and Kelly Hogan's not, and the Inuits aren't. I don't take that stuff. I don't think you need it. And so that's what I think is probably the difference, and might be what's going on there.